Hello everyone, welcome to the 191st episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. Today we're going to talk about Terrence Howard and all of his theories, which come from the interview from Joe Rogan. Of course, he was talking about this before, but the Joe Rogan interview kind of blowed this up to the public, or to the wider public. 7 million views and counting. So really impressive. But what I find most important actually in this whole thing isn't the content of the interview itself, but the reaction from scientists or real scientists, people debunking, people saying that he's just basically crazy, insane. And I just find it so weird that we haven't learned anything from history. That is, that there's this pattern where humanity settles in on a certain paradigm that cements society in a way, which is either everyone, surrounds himself around the shaman and his view of the world, or, in front of these polytheist gods and, Mercury, Jupiter, and all these different people, or, Christianity around Christianity and the whole paradigm around Christianity. And anyone that dares question the sort of common layer of understanding that everybody has in a society is basically a pariah and is going to be somehow pressured by the group and by group thinking into compliance, into coming in back into the fold, the lost sheep kind of metaphor. And there were so many lost sheep, and every time you're the first one to propose a new vision of the paradigm, you are a black sheep. You're like the lost sheep, the one that is crazy, the one that, and there's just so much evidence and history for this. And normally science is about learning from patterns, that's all it does, basically. You do an experiment, and if 100 times it turns out the same way, you've identified a pattern, and then you're trying to convert that pattern into a general applicable law that will predict what will happen if, by carrying out exactly the same things, you'll get the same result. And I don't see a more scientific pattern than this. And there's psychological studies about this, also about this tendency of humanity of having a cohesive group, whether it is nationalism, whether it is through language, whether it is through rituals, whether it is through a million different things. And whenever somebody from the group disrupts that sort of cohesion or disrupts those traditions or whatever, then there's a big backlash and pressure. And somehow we can identify it for things that we as humans see as in a negative light, like for instance nationalism. Oh yeah, these people, they're so nationalists, and then somebody becomes more cosmopolitan in that group because he marries somebody from another country, and then suddenly everybody's against that person, and we're like, yeah, that's bad. That's primal human nature. Those people, they're the nationalists, they're like backward, they're conservative, blah blah blah, and these people that want to marry to somebody else, another culture, well, that's magnificent. It's opening up new possibilities, it's new ways of thinking, it's open-mindedness. Finally, they're coming out of the dark ages of being, constricted in this very narrow worldview where only people of the same nationality are quote unquote good or have the right answers or, have the right traditions. But when we when we see this from the scientific perspective and somebody questions this homogeneity in science and tries to break out from that, then like the attacks are super violent because they are legitimate this time and objective. And it's like, oh, come on. And that's like, it's almost like you've identified a rule and you've made yourself the exception to the rule that applies to everything else but yourself. It's just crazy. I just find it completely nuts. But, it has happened so many times throughout history. Like, basically, the way that the scientific community is treating Terrence Howard right now is the same way as the church treated Galileo. And yet, scientists are using the example of Galileo and the church as one of these most important fundamental building blocks of why science, emerged from this oppression, and now it's become the oppressive force. And it's just, I just find it mind-boggling that we still haven't learned anything. We're still stuck in a pattern. We're still in this kind of way of thinking of, but now because we have science and empiricism, now we have the right to do this. Now we are correct in shunning and trying to hunt down all these crazy people that are proposing theories of everything that are based on quote unquote nothing or just intuitions or hunches. But realize that 500 years ago, when people were persecuting Galileo, they weren't saying, "Oh, we're going to arbitrarily persecute this guy for absolutely no particular reason, just because we're backward human beings that are not very evolved. Let's just pick on this guy because we don't like him." No, of course not. They did it with exactly the same kinds of intentions and exactly the same kind of mindset. That is, we are objectively right because we hold, the word of God that is in this Bible that cannot be questioned, and we are entitled to make that judgment because we hold the absolute truth. And if you look at the way that they're treating Terrence Howard, none of these scientists are doing it apologetically. They're not like saying, it pains me to say it. It pains me. I don't feel like I'm legitimate in criticizing Terrence Howard, but I feel like, or whatever, they're feeling 100% entitled of calling him a big bullshitter and that he should be censored. And they're saying this without any kind of hesitation, without any kind of nuance. Some of them, of course, do have nuance, but I've witnessed a lot of them that are just like the priests in the Inquisition, does exactly the same. And I really value people like Kurt Jaimungal from Theories of Everything, which actually wants to talk to him and say, okay, look, I want to really understand what you're about. What's your point of view? How do you see reality? I find that super laudable. And people have been, other people from, that he's interviewed, like Bernardo Castro, are saying, don't invite this guy. He's a big bullshitter. Jesus Christ. Anyways, so that's the first thing that just blew my mind out of this whole thing, is that we're just repeating a pattern. And normally, because you're in science, your methodology, your empirical thinking should enable you to identify the very pattern that you're repeating and break out of it. But no, no, you're just in it. Anyways, I just find it ridiculous. The second thing I want to talk about is, do we really care if what he's saying is true? Do we really care? And here's my point. So I'm going to take the example of Scientology because I know absolutely nothing of Scientology. I don't know if it's true. I've never read anything about Scientology. I just know the term and I just know that it's controversial. But regardless of whether something is true or not, what is definitely true is that once you hold that belief of whatever you think is true, you hold it really, and you're really persuaded that it's true, 100%, that belief is going to have an actual impact on your external reality and on your life. And it will impact you as the experiences that you're having as a human in this reality. So I often give the example of flat Earth. Is the Earth flat? Everybody says no today. And I would agree. But for the people that absolutely 100% believed that the Earth was flat, what did they do? Did they sail out into the open sea saying, let me see where this world, where the sea ends. I want to die. I want to be, I want to fall off the edge of the world. And, no, they were just sailing, along the coastlines, avoiding to go into the open sea for fear of falling over. So they were having the subjective experience of living on a flat world. Their belief, basically, it's almost as if it's circumscribed a certain experience within infinity that they could have in this reality, which is that they're on a flat Earth. And so regardless of whether it was true or not, they had the experience of it being true. And of course, now we know a little bit more about placebo effect and all these things. And there are many studies that show, for instance, that believing in God has many beneficial health effects as far as the placebo effect of believing in a God and not being exposed to existential panic because science and materialism has this kind of existential void in it where we're just, products of a big explosion, of randomness, of there's no meaning, there's no nothing, there's just cause and effect, and it just goes on, and there's no free will and all that. I mean, for a human being, psychologically speaking, that's not something easy to digest. And so my main point is we're still using criteria of something being true or not based on its empirical validity, but who gives a shit? I mean, literally, who gives a shit? Like, imagine if right now we could make an equation or something, or have some absolute definite empirical proof by, reproducing the same experiment over and over again, that somehow God exists, he's evil, and he's played a trick on us, and he's torturing us here, and regardless of whether we are good or bad or whatever, we're all going to hell forever, right? Imagine if you could absolutely 100% prove that that is correct. How would people live their lives from then on, right? What kind of effect would it have on your experience of reality? Would you be like, okay, well, that's the truth. I'll just carry on, wash my dishes, hug my kids and enjoy life until the day I die, and then obviously I'm going to hell regardless of what I do. No, of course not. It would definitely impact the way that you live your life. It would impact your mood. It would impact everything. Maybe you'd scratch everything. You'd say, okay, maybe I'll commit suicide or not, or I'll try to find a way to vanquish death and be able to be immortal, so I'll never have to go to hell or whatever. And that's what we so underestimate as humans in this quest for the truth, is that we have skin in the game. We don't want the truth to be just anything, because if it's an inconvenient truth that we find, or something that completely turns our lives upside down, we don't want it. And so the very first criteria that we should leverage whenever we're judging whether something is true or not is to pretend that it's true, and then run simulations in your mind saying, okay, if this is true, what would be the consequences on how I live my life? What would be the meaning? What would be the purpose of my life? Does it change anything in, the way that I interact with animals, interact with people or whatever? And how would I feel about it? Would I feel good about it? Would it be a positive kind of thing or not? And if you look throughout history, indeed, that is the way that we advance. I mean, nobody, in order to move, for instance, from Christianity and monotheism to science, it's not a quest about truth. It's a combination of the church's corruption, inquisitions, the Black Plague, the fact that there's the apocalypse, we're all going to hell, this kind of, you're feeling that a paradigm is kind of, you're locked in and you're lost. Like there's these people that are Orthodox, Protestants, Christians, they're all fighting, it's terrible. And suddenly someone has this kind of unifying new kind of theory where everything is material, it's just cause and effect and whatever. And thanks to all of the technologies or tools that we're going to be able to devise via this methodology and way of thinking, you'll be able to improve your life, light up your house, have electricity, running water, all these kinds of things. Great, sign me up. But understand that it is from an uncomfortable existential kind of place where you were unsatisfied with a dying paradigm that was already kind of atomizing in these different things, fighting and whatever, that you're like, I want something better. I want something better. It's not a quest for truth. Nobody cares. I mean, otherwise we would have found the truth a long time ago, right? So the human factor here is super important. And I find that this is completely lost in all the debates about finding out whether Terrence Howard is true, his theories are true or not. It's just try to imagine humanity living according or acting upon the principles that he has set forth in his theories, and how would that impact humanity and the way we live our lives. That's the very first criteria we should be talking about, even before thinking about whether it's true or not. Because understand that the more people kind of rally behind a paradigm or a worldview and start acting on it, the more your external reality resembles your paradigm. Like, the more people believe in monotheism, the more you have cathedrals in every city, the more you have priests that are giving mass, the more you have experiences, across humanity of all kinds of things. People were, having marital apparitions and miracles of, spontaneous healing and whatnot. And that's basically the power of, we don't want to, how should I say, we want to get rid of our creative powers as humans, as if our belief system and the way that we perceive reality has no bearing on the reality we experience, even though we know the placebo effect is real. And we know, therefore, that somebody that is 100% sure in the belief of miracles and whatever, then has a spontaneous remission and, his cancer is healed, in a matter of weeks or whatever. We don't want that. We prefer that humans have zero bearing on reality, and all it is just, you're pushing levers here and there and, having these chemical reactions. So you have 100% control over the whole equation and everything. And you can fit this universe in this tight little box that, has E equals MC squared, and that's it, and we normalize everything that's, a little too fuzzy. And this is again a pattern. This is again a pattern of every single paradigm that was predominant, is that it wants to fit reality in this one worldview, this one paradigm that captures everything. And scientists would say that's not true, but it is, because empiricism is not questioned. It is not called up into question. The very methodology at the foundation of how we gain knowledge through science isn't opened up. It will never be. Like, it is through experimentation, and you have to have it, repeat the same experiment, have the same results, and have a theory, a hypothesis, and all that stuff. What comes out of the methodology of empiricism, that can be called into question, but not the methodology itself. And so it's just like shamanism, just like everything, I mean, you can question the shaman on his actual perception of spirits of nature and whatever, but the whole spirits of nature thing, that's unquestionable. But maybe the shaman had a bad interpretation, right? And so you have to always find the sacred cow here. Then on the contents of Terrence Howard's insights. If you've bothered to watch the 190 plus videos on this channel, you know that I actually have very similar views in terms of everything being vibrations or whatever. What I do find a bit difficult in Terrence's worldview or paradigm that he's talking about. Well, first of all, let me just say that it's based on, the works of Walter Russell, which I've also been a little bit familiar with. I think Nassim Haramein is going in the same direction. And there are other people that are also studying the universe from an electrical point of view, like the Electric Universe by, Thornhill and Wallace Thornhill and Talbot. So, yeah, and I'll put the links to Terrence Howard's interview and a few other things in the description of the video. But, I mean, it's not that outlandish, his theories. The only thing is, so I have a couple of points that I raised. So the first one is, I think he underestimates the number of steps that are between us, humans, and this material reality and the vibrational substrate that he's talking about. And ultimately, if everything is just vibrations and whatever, I think that, so let me put this way. The reason why you create intermediary layers between you and base reality is to be able to construct, it's almost like putting on a straitjacket, but with that straitjacket, you're going to have much more creativity in terms of what you're going to build from those intermediary layers that you've placed on yourself. So let me put it this way. Imagine Lego blocks. You arrange them in a certain way, and then you decide that the way that you've arranged those Lego blocks is a Lego block in itself that should, interact with other Lego blocks. And then you do that, and then those Lego blocks you say that that's one unit, and now you have to use that unit and assemble that unit with other units to create something. You'll find that that is extremely restrictive, because now, if you just took that first Lego block, you could arrange anything you want from that. Why do you need those intermediary kind of layers or structures which limit what you can build? Well, I think that's one of the biggest core assumptions and errors that we make in our reality, is that we think that the universe is building towards something or building upwards. That is, it starts with something very simple, like the Big Bang and a few elementary particles or whatever, and then boom, and then it complexifies over time. I would say that it's the reverse problem. It is, you are infinite. You can be anything. You can take any shape. Like just your like conscious liquid light that can assume any form. And then your biggest problem is figuring out what form you should take, because you have no idea, because all forms are equal. Basically imagine a lucid dream where you could, as a human, decide to take that lucid dream in any direction and play with reality the way that it would be like a giant play of light that you can manipulate instantly with your thoughts. And that's what a lucid dream is, ultimately. Like, you want to be in front of a stadium, you're in a stadium. You want to be the best soccer player, you're the best soccer player. You want to be in front of an amphitheater with people clapping at you, there you are. You're in an amphitheater, people are clapping at you. But understand that all of the things that you think about as humans, as scenes that you want in your lucid dream, they're based on your experience as a limited, compressed, human with a very limited potential, limited amount of power over reality, and all these very constricting laws. And now imagine that you didn't have the whole human experience of being so limited, of being so small and insignificant, quote unquote, compared to this huge reality, and having all these very strict rules for manifesting things. Like, you have to actually, if you want to build something, you have to manipulate the physical matter, and you have to use your hands, and you wouldn't have all these things. And from day one, anything that you think about would come into being instantly. Your creativity would be super, super, super limited. Plus, everything would be equal to you. Like, any scene that you could imagine would feel the same. Like, imagine if being the top soccer player would require no effort, just a thought, just I'm the best soccer player and you are. Would you value that experience? Would you actually want to project yourself? Would you have any desire towards building up to that experience? You wouldn't. It would be worthless to you. The reasons why things are more or less desirable to humans is thanks to the fact that reality is so sticky and so painfully resistant to our will. Thereby, you can rank things by order of difficulty and admire people that have made more effort in unlocking certain experiences. But just like we have difficulty, and it's funny because we're having that same discussion for art, for instance. Can we still admire somebody that types in a prompt, create the most inspiring and most beautiful art piece ever into an AI, and it generates an image that most people would find absolutely beautiful and awe-inspiring, whatever, but do you have the same admiration for the guy that typed the prompt into the AI, or an artist that has refined his skill of drawing over his entire life to be able to carve out this beautiful creative piece of art, right? And so, we're having those same kinds of debates, symbolically, like what I'm talking about. You can find it in plenty of other places, because this is the moment where we kind of have to come to terms, let's say, with the fact that every single paradigm that we've been through, these were all different straitjackets that we've worn to constrict our experience of an unlimited, free reality, basically, and to cultivate our creativity so that from that place, we'll be able to enhance the experience of the universal experience. What we're actually bringing, I think, to this universe is direction, is preference. It is, you prefer to watch a scene where you're all happy, clappy in beautiful fields of flowers rather than genocide and war. Interesting. Because again, if you scrape everything, and ignore that the fact that there are human beings, that there's matter, that there's everything, if you just look at reality through the eyes of a untrained AI, then whether it's watching scenes of genocide and war or a beautiful field with flowers, to it's just light. It's just pixels in a different configuration. There's no preference there. And so you have to imagine that the universe is doing things in reverse. It's not that it's building up things from in complexity. It's that it strives to create the best strategy to limit itself so that it knows what to do with its infinite potential. And so that's where we have it all backwards. And so what I'm saying is we should love the fact that we were wrong, quote unquote, in terms of all the different paradigms that we've been through, because we never were wrong. All that we were doing is, let's say, developing preferences for what kind of scenes we want to experience in a giant play of light, where anything can be possible, technically. And devising rules for having preferences, desires, and cultivating our creativity in the sense that we would prefer to experience one, scene rather than another scene. And so this is not a digression because it's directly tied to Terrence Howard's theory. It is that if he's correct, if everything he says is correct, then if humanity adopts his way of thinking and we develop these revolutionary technologies, ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to unlock for us a certain new experience within infinity, within infinite potential or in this infinite play of light. That's all that it's going to do, right? Just like science unlocked new possibilities, new experiences within a giant play of light. Like right now, we can go into a rocket and fly to the moon, right? Could we do that with the Christian paradigm? No, we couldn't. So that's all that we're doing. And the new kind of way to decide whether we should go in one direction or another shouldn't be based on this quest for what is true or not. That's not the way that we should distinguish between things. We should say, is that an experience that I would like to have? Would I like, and also think of the consequences of what adopting Terrence's worldview for all of humanity would mean for our collective experience. So, it's like imagine right now we're transitioning from this way of thinking where we're in a video game and we're constantly thinking that we're going to uncover the ultimate rules underpinning the video game. And every time we are like, now we know everything. It's a polytheism. There's Jupiter, there's Mercury, there's Apollo, and all of these different gods and whatever. Or, no, it's monotheism. There's just this one God, Christianity, and there's the apocalypse, there's heaven, there's hell, and all this stuff. And now it's more like we're awakening to the fact that we are like a living, talking operating system that can install upon itself any kind of software. And now you're starting to think differently. Now when you go into the theories of everything channel, it's like you're going into a GameStop shop of where you have all these video games, and now you're having to pick between different video games and saying, Do I want to have the Final Fantasy experience, or do I want to have the Mario experience, or do I want to have the Zelda experience? And it's more like that. It's more like, do I want to have the Nassim Haramein, vision of the world, theory or whatever experience? Do I want to have the Donald Hoffman experience of reality, where we are just a projection of a higher dimensional reality into space-time and all that stuff? Do we want to have the Terrence Howard experience of electric universe and magnetism and all that stuff? And that's a completely different way of thinking, because again, it's no longer a sort of a battle between truth or falsehood. It's more about trying to figure out what you want to experience and trying to think in terms of how you're going to unravel into the future if you adopt that paradigm. And that's going to have a massive... And again, if you followed my videos, in my mind, the reason why we have such diversity in theories of everything that seemingly contradict each other, it's because we are like a master seed. Like from the insane diversity in not only biology, because we have an insane biological diversity on the planet in terms of all the different ecosystems, all the different climates, all the different species. We also have an insane diversity in ideas or ideologies or ways of viewing the world on our planet. And from all of that diversity, you can build so many different experiences. It's almost like we're more like a game engine, where developers are taking it in different directions, but ultimately you can build any kind of game from that. And that's what's most interesting. So think of the living cell, the structure of the living cell, the first living cell, as also that kind of thing, where from that building block, you can assemble it in so many different ways that create plants, animals, slugs, fish, humans. And from Earth, with humanoid creatures on it, and with all of the diversity of ideas and ideologies and paradigms and ways of thinking, you can create such a diversity of other civilizations of, people that go, like, imagine like if Earth kind of split into all of these different branches of versions or timelines, kind of like the living cell, that split and multiplied. It almost like it created two timelines for itself, one where it would multiply and have experiences that would end up building a fish, and one where it would multiply and building a sea turtle. And those two would then interact with each other, but they would have their own very, very unique experience of reality, which uniformity is not, that's not what it's about. It's about diversity. It's not like the cell would be like, I've made some empirical tests and I'm supposed to be only a fish, and screw all of the other things that can be made from me. I'm just going to limit my potential to being just a fish. Right? This is crazy. And that's what's happening now with all this reactionary or conservative kind of reaction to Terrence Howard's work is, no, let's stick to the standard model of physics and all this stuff. And that's the only way we should view reality. And it's almost like you're just creating one single timeline for humanity from there, which is completely counter-natural. That's not what the universe has in mind. That's not what it wants. If you look at everything that precedes us, it's all about diversity of experiences, multiplying the potential of how it can experience itself through agents inside of it. And so, whether you look at, simulation theory or any other things, why would there be only one way to experience the simulation, right? It comes back to the exact same argument. Like the whole point is to have as many different points of views on that same pool of light, let's say giant pool of light, and to be able to experience and see inside that pool of light everything that it contains. But you have to do that by first limiting yourself, because otherwise you cannot have infinity looking at infinity and seeing something specific. It just doesn't work, right? So you have to be limited in some way. Now, where I do disagree with Terrence Howard a little bit is, and I'm trying to reconcile his view, like the way that we decompress the flower of life. Like he's saying that basically there are no straight lines in nature, that everything is curved, the Euclidean space and 90-degree angles and all these things. And in some way he's right, but in some other ways I think he's a bit too harsh on in what he's saying there, because everything is shifting all the time. That I agree. But the reason why I think reality appears static is thanks to those Platonic solids, which aren't curved. Because anything that is curved is shifting too much in order for you to experience something continuous or something solid or the illusion of solidity. So going back to certain videos, you could arrive to this kind of conclusion of what I'm going to say now, but now I'm just going to condense it all together. Again, if you look at the flower of life, you can see one vibration and a vibration of opposite phase. So, it's these circles that sort of are overlapping. But if you look at that overlap, you can draw a wave on it, and you can draw a wave of opposite phase. And when when Terrence is saying that everything is in movement and flow and breathing in and breathing out, what he fails to understand is that this process of breathing in, breathing out, this process of waving in one direction or waving in the opposite phase happens instantaneously. There's no time at that point. It's all so fast that both are created simultaneously. And if both are created simultaneously and both are experienced simultaneously, they collapse onto each other also instantly. And so it's as if this kind of witness or universal observer, when it was looking at this process of vibration of its mind sort of entering in this vibratory state, and you have to go a few videos back to know what I'm talking about here, and then collapsing back into nothingness. When it witnessed this process happening infinitely fast, what is left is kind of like a residue, kind of like, when you look at the sun and you close your eyes and you have that kind of shadow or after image of the sun still in your retina. What is left is these very straight lines and geometric figures. Like if you take the flower of life and you collapse every single wave, you end up with these lines that go through it, and it's all triangles, right? All of it is triangles. It's a grid of triangles from which you can then build, octagons and other kinds of geometric figures. Or you have the other flower of life, which is based on cubes, where you have like these overlapping circles that overlap in a way that it creates the cubes. And those are the two very first essential geometric figures. And they exist because they are at the exact center, if you will, between two polarities that just go all the time back and forth, but that switch back and forth so fast that they create this after image where you have these geometric figures, almost like it's almost like if space or nothingness or this in this mind's eye, they had these geometric figures to play with. And on the one hand, the waving process is the shifting nature, the way you play with these forms that evolve, but you have to have something to play with like you have to have building blocks to play with, plus also the dynamic mechanism of the waves and patterns and all that stuff combined. If you only have the changing principle, then you have nothing to experience. It's just all change. It's just all a big pool of vibrations and whatever, that there's nothing to hold on to, nothing to grapple. Like right now as a human, you're watching this on a tablet or a screen. Your screen is not waving all over the place. It appears to be static. It appears to be fixed. It appears to be in a specific geometric shape that is unchanging. Of course, it is changing, because otherwise you wouldn't be seeing this video animated. You wouldn't be seeing pixels. You wouldn't, it wouldn't deteriorate. It wouldn't suffer entropy. But we shouldn't throw out that part just because now we understand the back and forth kind of principle, right? There is a middle point to that, like the center. And so when Plato was fascinated by Platonic solids, it's because his intuition was kind of true. It is true that this world is built off of that sort of grid that is as an after image in the mind's eye of this consciousness that just has this experiences these wavy thought patterns in its mind, so to speak. And so it uses that, it leverages that for its creative purposes, and it has the vibratory changing nature of this back and forth to animate those otherwise fixed and eternal Platonic solids, or, and so, we have to reconcile all of these things. The second kind of piece of beef that I have with Terrence Howard is that he seems to have deep insight into and technological applications for his worldview and what could be done with it, and his linchpin kind of technology of these drones that can rotate and assemble and all these. It's fascinating. It's absolutely terrific, and I find that super. But I don't think he goes deep enough in terms of his ontology of the root of things. He talks about magnetism. He talks about electricity. I would like to know more of his metaphysics, more of his ontology of, he's still in the world of form there. And there's no problem with the world of form. It's just that it's good to go as deep as you can go in terms of your ontology, and then working your way upward towards your worldview, because at least you're rooted into something. And so I don't know what his ontology is, and I would have liked him to explore that in a bit more detail. Other than that, I feel that it would be good for him to sort of backtrack a bit, because when he starts talking about frequencies and everything in the periodic table, I mean, he does sound crazy because he just jumps so many different steps and explanation that it's not easy to follow, even for someone like me that is used to these ideas of Walter Russell and stuff. So it would be good for him to kind of backtrack a bit and explain in much more detail the hydrogen atom, the frequency associated, and all those things. So I think those are my thoughts about Terrence Howard. I think his work is fascinating. I really like some of the things that he's done, like this transcendental lighting and all that stuff. I think it's absolutely beautiful. But again, I think his insight into reality is definitely like an extra timeline that can be added to humanity and the experiences that we can carve out in the infinite number of experiences that we have. But I find that it's super important to carve out the space for people to start acting like stem cells inside a wider body and feeling like they have the real freedom to choose between being a cell inside the stomach or a cell inside the lungs, which would be like humans that would now see this reality and all of the different paradigms and worldviews as different organs in the body of the collective body of humanity that they wish to work for, quote unquote, or they wish to feed, because it contributes to a broader experience for humanity, rather than thinking that they have to pick the right or correct or true vision of reality, and pick on those terms. And so when you identify with Terrence Howard's worldview, don't think, oh, I'm actually rooting for him because he's right and everybody else is wrong. No, do it because, wow, his worldview inspires me. I feel like that future that can be derived from the way that he's thinking is something that I want to experience in the future. And doing it that way, you're not doing it in opposition to something, which is already positive in itself. And I think it reflects much more the direction in which we're supposed to go as humanity, like just opening up all possibilities, and from those possibilities picking what we prefer rather than what is quote unquote true. That is kind of the wrong way to go about it. So hope you found this video interesting. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, and talk to you in the next video. Bye guys.